Good morning, dear students. This is your science teacher, and today I'm going to teach you science IIT. Okay. From last few videos, we will continue with our second chapter of science IIT, that is force. And in this chapter, we discussed on the different types of force. And another force is worked between two surfaces. Another force is worked between two surfaces. This contact force is called friction force. What we call friction force or friction. Okay, so we know that force is this force act between two surfaces which are in contact. Okay, it is called frictional force, and some important characteristics of frictional force are there. So we discussing the different characters of the frictions. So first one is it depend on smoothness or roughness of surface in which they are contact. For example, when we are moving on a when we are walking on a rough surface, it is easy to us on the walk on the rough surface. So it means that the roughness of surface is increase the friction force. Okay, and if we walk on the glass surface or a smooth surface, so we are walk on that surface with difficulty. Okay, so why? Because of smoothness. Means the surface is smooth or rough is responsible for the friction. How much friction are there is depend on the roughness of smoothness of the surface. Okay, so more roughness, if the more roughness is present between the two surfaces, so the friction force will be greater. And on the other hand, if the surface is smooth, the friction will be less. Okay, and the second point, it is a self-adjusting force. It is a self-adjusting force. A friction force working between two surfaces. We know that. And when suppose here by this picture we can try to understand the wall stop down to friction after rolling means when we rolling a ball from here, so the wall are moving in which direction? Here. Why? Because of the gravity. Okay, this wall is moving, rolling in this downward direction. Then when we see that after some time the ball is stopped. Why? Because the rough surface of the soil applying force on the wall in opposite direction of the movement means in this direction. Surface the surface on which ball is rolling applying opposite direction force. This force is frictional force. So the ball is stopped, and the smoothness or the roughness of the surface is self-adjusting how much friction is there. Okay, then the third point, okay, it always opposes the motion of a body over another body. Means when one body, suppose it is a one body table is there, and the second body is ball which rolling on it. So these opposes the motion of the body. Means one surface of table oppose the surface of wall on moving. So it is stopped. Okay, come to the next point. Friction a necessary evil. friction is very most important force, and it is present in our daily life. We see we see why with some examples. It plays very important in our daily life, so it is necessary also. So many times frictional force is useful, but when we observe the friction force, we see that friction force many times is useful, but sometimes it is not useful, or in case it is harmful to us. Okay, or is desirable or undesirable also. So first we see the examples of undesirable effects of friction force. First we see undesirable effects, means the effects of friction force that we don't want. For example, friction bear away the soles of shoes, means we know that we are moving on a surface by wearing shoes. So because of the friction between the surface of ground or road or the surface of soil, we are moving. It is a road, and we move on the surface. We're moving on the surface by our shoes. Okay, friction with the shoes. So what is the result? The sole of the shoe is, because of friction, the sole is reduced, and gradually due to friction, sole of our shoes wear out. So it is a undesirable effect for our life that we don't want. Okay, so similar in case of the vehicle also. Similar condition we see in the vehicles, because of friction the car or bike or bicycle are moving on the road. So the because of friction the tire of the vehicles are removed. Then the second example of undesirable effect, reduced friction may lead to fall, means if the friction is reduced, so maybe lead to fall. For example, we are moving on the road, we are moving or walking on the road. If you step on a banana skin, so what's the result? You might slip. Why? Because the banana skin reduce the friction between foot and the road surface. So you are slipping. So it is also a undesirable effect of friction due to the uh, reduction of friction. Okay. Third example, friction wear out machine parts. So in our machinery, we see that different machine parts in our motors, in our bike, cycle, and other machinery. Machinery parts also undergo wear and tear due to the force of friction. When the parts of the machine moving continuously, when the parts of the machine moving continuously, they rub to each other constantly. So because of friction, so these machine parts going damage. Okay, because of friction. It is also an example of undesirable effects. Then the next point, friction produce heat. Yes, this example we also see at many places. Friction produce heat. Heat, sorry. When we are drive our bike, drive our bike or car, and we know that the engine of the bike has different parts and they are moving continuously when it moved. When the bike is moved, so different parts are moving continuously, and uh, re- rub to each other, continuously moving, and they produce heat. So after some time, when we touch the engine of the bike, we feel it is heat. Okay, and another example is when we continuously moving any, for example, you are using uh, sewing machine, sewing machine. So in this, when it is moving continuously, so it will also produce heat. And another example is our fan. When our fan is moving continuously, we while touching them, we can feel that the fan produce heat. Okay, and the friction slow down motion. So because of the friction, motion is also slow down. All the moving things are slowed down by friction. It is already we discussed. It reduces the motion of the moving parts of the machine. Okay, when the friction is higher, then the moving of the machine parts is going slow. So uh, to to reduce the friction, we are using lubricant. We are using lubricant oil or grease in our machinery. Yes, in our bike also, in our bicycles also. We are using lubricant oil or lubricant grease to reduce the friction. So our machinery parts moving smoothly. Okay. Then the last point of undesirable effects, friction reduce the efficiency of machine. So it is very clear that different part of force applied to run a machine in wasting overcome friction between the moving parts. So this reduce the efficiency of machine. Okay, when the friction is higher in the between the parts, moving parts of the machine, it reduce the efficiency of the machine because they are not moving in their normal speeds. So okay, we are using lubricants to reduce the friction or to increase the efficiency of the machine. But our topic is that due to the friction, friction reduce efficiency of machine. So yeah, we are using lubricants to reduce the friction. And the next point is desirable effects. The effects we are discussed, these are undesirable, that we don't want, and these are not useful for other. But now we are discussing desirable effects that is necessary for our daily life. And friction is very play very important role in our daily life or daily services. Friction enable First one is friction enable us to write and draw on the paper. Yes, it is an example of desirable effect of friction. Our pen is moving on paper and we write anything on the paper because of the rubbing, because of the friction. If there would be no friction between the pen or pencil, pen, pencil, or the paper, writing or drawing on paper would not have been possible. So it enables friction is enable us to write on paper. Okay. Second one, friction enable us to burn a matchstick. Yes, when we burn a matchstick on matchbox, side of the matchbox, so you are feeling here the side of the matchbox are rough because a red phosphorus is fixed there. When we rubbing the matchstick on this rough surface, so because of the rubbing, it produces a heat and the red phosphate convert into white phosphorus. Sorry, red phosphorus convert into white phosphorus, and it produces heat and our matchstick is burn. Okay, so when a matchstick is rubbed along a side of the matchbox, the friction between head of the matchstick or the side of the matchbox produce heat and light up the matchstick. Okay, and the next point, friction enable us to cut wood with saw. Yes, it is also example of desirable effects and it will be used for our work when we want to cut a wood with a saw. Here friction plays an important role because of friction. The saw cutting the wood. If there is no friction, that we don't cut the wood by saw. Okay. Due to friction, a saw blade and a wood, we can cut wood using a saw. If there is no friction, then cutting of wood would not be possible. And then the next point, yes, friction enables us to walk without slipping. When we walk on the road or any other surface, it enables to walk without slipping. If there is no friction, then we are not enabled to walk on the surface. If the surface is smooth, it is difficult to us on the move, difficult to move on the surface. Okay, friction between the soles of our shoe, friction between soles of our shoe and the ground prevent us from slipping. Okay, if there is no friction between the soles and the okay, it would not possible to walk. This is the reason that walking on slippery ground or polishing floor is difficult. Walking on smooth surfaces is difficult because of smooth surface friction is reduced. And same condition with the friction between tire of a car and road enable to move car without skidding. And then the last point, friction enable us to apply brake and stop moving vehicle. Because of friction, our we can apply the brakes on the moving vehicle to stop. Okay. When we apply brake on a moving bicycle or a car, when we are applying brake on moving car or bicycle, so the brake shoes, the brake shoe you see in the bike or in the cycle also, in cycle a wheel, and you see here the rubber shoe is present in bicycle, and in the bike in the center of the vehicle you see this type of the two like this, these two brake shoe is present. When we apply force, this brake shoe expand and applying brake on the inner surface of the wheel, so our vehicle is stopped. It rub on the rim of the wheel. Okay, so the friction between brake shoe, the friction between brake shoe and rim prevent the wheel from moving ahead, and the bicycle or a car stops. Okay, thus the brake vehicle work due to the friction between brake shoe and rim of the wheel. Yes, it is a desirable effect and it is necessary for our driving. Okay, I hope you understand. If you have any doubt, so you can ask. Good luck.